One of Roald Dahl's early and well-beloved successes was Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, a story about a boy, a mad genius candy maker, and a chocolate factory so wondrous that it defied imagination. Since its publication in 1964, the story has inspired two movies from Warner Brothers. One released in 1971, directed by Mel Stewart and starring Gene Wilder, Jack Albertson, and Peter Ostrom, and with a screenplay written by Roald Dahl himself. And the other released more recently in 2005, directed by Tim Burton, and starring Johnny Depp and Freddie Highmore. Both of these movies were well received by audiences, and it's honestly hard to decide which one I should compare to the book, as they both use the book as their primary source material, and they're both fairly well known and of decent quality. As such, I've decided to do both. A later review will focus on the 2005 Tim Burton movie, but this is Books vs. Movies review of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory versus Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. As always, we'll start by looking at our main character, in this case, Charlie Bucket. Charlie is the good kid in this story. He's the one who inherits Wonka's factory at the end because he was deemed the best of the 5 golden ticket winners. However, it's apparent that both book and movie have very different definitions of what it means to be good. Despite being poor and starving, the Charlie of the book never complains and in fact does everything he can to make the situation more bearable for himself and for his family. Really, the only time in the story when he thinks of himself is when he finds the dollar in the street and decides that he's going to use part of it to buy a chocolate bar that he'll finally be able to eat all for himself. Movie Charlie's a little different. First of all, this Charlie actually has a job. In the movie, the father has died, and so both he and his mother have to work in order to support the family. So he doesn't just try to make things more bearable, he actively tries to make things better. When he gets paid for the first time, he buys a loaf of bread, so that his family can enjoy a banquet as opposed to the cabbage soup that they're used to. He also offers to pay for his grandfather's tobacco. It was a different time. So he's a lot more active in the movie, but he doesn't quite follow Roald Dahl's original definition of good. Excuse me? Well, think about it, Matt. Why did Charlie originally win the factory? By not getting into trouble like the other kids. Exactly. By not doing anything. And that's the main problem with the Charlie of the book. He doesn't do anything. Charlie in the book is considered good because he's the only one left at the end. He stayed quiet and didn't touch through the whole tour and therefore is considered worthy as the next owner of the factory. And what's wrong with that message? Oh, absolutely nothing. But here's the thing. In order to take over Wonka's factory, it's reasonable to assume that you should have at least a little bit of imagination. Take risks every now and then, just like Wonka does. Charlie in the book isn't that guy by any stretch of the imagination. Roald Dahl is really good at creating these protagonists who are the epitome of good little boys and girls who never get into any trouble. The only problem with that is they're also not very interesting. In the movie, Charlie does actually act like a kid, especially when it comes to how invested he is in the golden ticket contest. He wants to find a golden ticket as much as anybody. In fact, he says he wants to find one more than anybody. Plus, when he's in the factory, he actually does get into trouble when he and Grandpa Joe steal the fizzy lifting drinks. And he gets into trouble for the same reason that the other kids do. He impulsively tries to take something from the factory for himself. The only difference is that instead of getting turned into a blueberry or sent down the garbage chute, he and Grandpa Joe just get a good scare. Though, of course, Wonka does yell at them for it at the end. Okay, so what distinguishes Charlie in the movie as the good kid? The Slugworth subplot. Unlike the book, the movie actually has something of an antagonist in the character of Slugworth, mentioned in the book but not actually seen, who tries to tempt the 5 kids into getting him an everlasting gobstopper so he can discover the formula and copy and hopefully ruin Wonka. The kids all take an everlasting gobstopper, but Charlie is the only one to return it, despite the fact that Wonka just took away his prize. This illustrates a quality in Charlie that is greater than just staying out of trouble. Honesty and integrity. Okay, that's 2 qualities, but whatever. The movie recognizes that Charlie is a kid, and kids sometimes get into trouble. But the reason why Charlie is the good kid in this movie is because he has the integrity to do what he believes is right, despite the fact that he has no earthly reason to do so. Not only does his family desperately need the money that Slugworth is offering, but Wonka has given him absolutely no reason to return the gobstopper at the end of the movie. Which is a much deeper level of good than just keeping your hands to yourself. But in this debate, there is more than one title character, so now that we've looked at the title character of the book, let's look at the title character of the movie. Now, in both versions, we're introduced to Wonka late in the story, even though we hear about him from almost the very beginning. Wonka is a mysterious man in both book and movie, but there are a few more stories about him in the book. The movie basically focuses on why the factory closes, but the book actually starts with 3 or 4 chapters about Wonka and his brilliant candy-making skills, which gives us a little bit more wonder about him. When we finally do meet him, Wonka is introduced as a man with boundless energy and a sort of eccentricity bordering on madness. His entrance in the movie presents us with both. It also introduces us to a character who's not always completely truthful. You can never tell from one minute to the next whether or not Wonka is telling you the complete truth, which really deepens the mystery about him. Wonka in the movie doesn't have quite as much of the endless enthusiasm that Wonka in the book has. He's friendly, but he's very calm. It almost feels like he's giving them cursory greetings at the beginning. The book Wonka seemed genuinely thrilled to see everyone. Book Wonka also captured the energy a little bit better. He seemed a lot like a hyperactive child, which for somebody who works in a candy factory kind of makes sense. Movie Wonka, though he was always hurrying them along during the tour, was a little bit more reserved. But in a way, that's one of the cooler things about Movie Wonka. Very little phases him. Book Wonka panicked a lot. Every time it looked like one of the kids was about to get into trouble, he would always shout at them to come back. Movie Wonka was always very calm and resigned, almost as if he knew that no matter what he said, they were going to get into trouble anyway.
Stop, don't come back.
The only time he really panics is when Augustus is drinking from his chocolate river and then falls in. And even then he's more worried about the chocolate than he is about Augustus. And once it becomes clear that nothing can be done to save his chocolate, he just kind of sits back and enjoys the show.
The suspense is terrible. He's gonna go this time. I hope it'll last.
It's not boredom or lack of energy, it's almost like he's saying, well, that's another kid gone. Let's see what happens now. I really like this version of Wonka because it's like he knew going in that this sort of thing was going to happen. Also, I definitely think that the movie captures his eccentricities really well by having him speak random different languages, quote poetry, and break into song for no particular reason. If there's one thing that Gene knows how to do, it's play the quiet madman. And yet, there is no doubt that Wonka is brilliant. On this score, I will say that the book shows a lot more evidence of Wonka's brilliance, both with the stories and also with the factory itself. But Wonka's self-confidence and cool demeanor in the movie make it seem as though he has everything planned out. Plus, the Slugworth test at the end is a much better way of determining who is worthy to run his factory, as opposed to who I like the best. And this Wonka really does seem more like a real person, especially at the end, both when he blows up at Charlie, seeming every bit as much of a shrewd businessman as anyone else in the business, and also when he's asking Charlie to run his factory, being very sincere in his desire to essentially make Charlie his heir. Where Book Wonka still had kind of a cartoonish quality about him. Also, Movie Wonka is a lot more likable. Even when horrible things are happening for which he is responsible, you can't help but like the guy. He's a little more relatable that way, and yet he still maintains his mystery. So, once again, movie gets the point.